Hello my lovely viewers, what is going on? My name is Heart Attack Guy and welcome back to Soul's Guide for Dark Souls 2. Today we're going to talk a bit about character balancing, levelling up, stuff like that, and armour and weapons and all that jazz. So we'll start with character balancing, which is vital in the Souls games. So let's begin. So with all Souls games, when you begin, you won't always know what you want to be, what sort of class you want to follow, and that's fine. That's completely fine. But as you get further into the game, and once you've spent some points, you'll start to realise that you'll be following one certain path, and if you don't follow that path through, you'll find that your character struggles in certain areas. For instance, I have a fire bomb in my right hand currently, but I can't use it. I used to be able to use it because I had my attribute points set differently to how I have them set now, and that's because I was basically a beginner. I didn't know much about how the levelling system works in this game, and I had 10 points in attunement and a few in faith and so on and so forth, so I could use this. I added intelligence points for it, but I also had quite a high strength build. But as I got further into the game, I realised that this spell was useless to me. It was completely useless. By the time I could use it, it couldn't do anything because I was quite far through the game, and by the time I'd gathered the points needed for it, it was just pointless. So I went ahead and reallocated my points, and trust me, that's a hard thing to do because you only get 1 or 2 opportunities to do it, because you need something called a soul vessel, which is rather hard to find. One can be found in the middle house there if you get the key. Now I won't go into how to get the key and all that jazz, that's a subject matter for another day, but what I will say is it's a pain in the ass getting soul vessels. It really is, and there aren't many in this game, and what you do with your character primarily sticks. So we're going to talk a bit about levelling, and I'm going to start by showing you my character's statistics. Okay, so as you can see, my character is leaning more towards the strength build, and as I said previously earlier in the video, I did start to lean towards faith, intelligence and attunement. I had attunement at 10, I had faith on something like 20 odd, intelligence was at 10, and I could use that fire spell, but because I'd been focusing most of the game on strength, dexterity, vigour and vitality and endurance, it was useless. It was by the time I got to the level I wanted to be for my fire spell, I couldn't use it. It wouldn't work on any of the enemies. It would damage them slightly, and that would be fine at the start of the game if I had these stats mixed up a bit. But you should always focus your stats in one particular area, which is what I've started to do now with this character, which is a bad time to do it because I'm soul level 121, and it gets much harder later on in the game if you screw up. Now this is one of my main characters that I use. This guy's on New Game Plus. Now if you want to use a strength build, you should definitely go for vigour, endurance and strength, with dexterity being a secondary attribute. So if that's what you're going for, go for those and focus mainly on vigour rather than strength, although you will find quite a few weapons you pick up early game you won't be able to use. Don't worry about that, just leave them be. Don't think, wow, that's a lovely mace, I want to use that now, I'm going to focus on strength, because you'll regret it. Never make your decisions based upon weapons you receive in the early game, because you will regret it later on. That's what I did, and that's why I'm here right now, because I got that fire spell and I was like, I need to use that, and by the time I could, useless. Now if you want to go for a sorcerer build, then it's quite obvious. You need to go for attunement, you need to go for intelligence and faith, and have some endurance as well, so you can keep away, so you can keep your distance. A dex build, which is one for archers and dual wielding and such. Dex, vigour, endurance, vitality, and maybe just some attunement and some faith, so you can use heal. But just make sure that you know what you want to do by the time you get to the second or third area. So for instance, Forest of the Fallen Giants, or when you get to the Pursuers area, Undead Burg. But it's alright, the start of the game, it's completely fine. Most of you won't know what you want to do with your character, and that's fine. I didn't. I had no idea. I made a bandit. He's a bandit, but he's ended up being a I don't know what you'd call him. I use a spear with him, and sometimes I use a halberd. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I use a great shield as well, which I've got with me, so I can stagger opponents. But it's very important that you know what you're doing past the early game. I think that's kind of obvious what I'm saying, but I just thought I'd say it anyway, because I know it's a really hard game to get into, and if you screw up your stats, that's you done in this game. That really is you done. So yeah, that's leveling sorted. So now we're going to talk just a tiny bit about equipment and the way it works, and what you should do with your character regardless of what build you make. Now, I found throughout the game that it's always best to have a few items equipped at one time. So for your right hand weapon, you should definitely have 2 weapons equipped, your primary and secondary, because weapons do break on this game, especially during long stretches between bonfires, so you'll need a secondary weapon. Now my secondary weapon has a very low durability and it won't last very long, and that's fine because it's only a secondary, and usually you won't be using your secondary unless, like I said, it's a long stretch, and usually towards the end of that stretch you need it just to get yourself there. Same thing, well, I wouldn't say the same thing with shields. Why I have 2 shields equipped is because I don't know if you can see the stats. I know the stats for someone that doesn't play Dark Souls are very hard to understand, but if you press select you can see what each stat is. Now the reason I have 2 shields equipped is because one of them is for magic resistance, as you can see there on the right hand side, and then this one is for physical resistance. Now in the game there are 3 types of shields, all offering different types of defense. There are small shields, which are really good for parrying. There's standard shields, which are a good mix of parrying and just standard physical defense and magic defense. And then there are great shields, which is what I use for my physical defense. These can withstand a hell of a lot of damage and punishment I should say. But they usually offer very little magic resistance and they cannot be parried with, so they're very good for melee builds, but they're not very good for sorcerers. Now when you're equipping your shields, the one thing that you need to bear in mind, regardless of what class you are, you need a shield with 100% physical resistance, otherwise you're going to take damage even if you're blocking. The physical resistance attribute can be seen here on this side. Now, unless that's 100, you don't want that shield. I guess there are some that you can let slide through. For instance, if you have one that's purely equipped for magic, like this one, then that's fine. And you won't be using these shields much, these magic shields, unless you are, of course, a mage, because there's not many areas in the game that have pure magic enemies. But it's towards the late game that I found that I needed this the most to defend me from light spells and dark spells and all that jazz. And yeah, that's pretty much it with the shields. Now we're on to armour. So this is a bit more complicated. There are many different types of armour in the game, and I found that when I play co-op, most people don't use armour based on the defence. They base it upon looks. They try and gather all the equipment from one enemy type and then they wear that. That's fine, I get that. Like for instance, right now I'm wearing the Mastodon armour, most of it anyway, and that's cool, whatever you want to do. But you're going to be needing throughout the game different types of armour. You're going to, if you're like me or you're like most sane people in the world, you're going to want to go for what's either the best defence, what's the lightest, or what's a good mix of the two. I always switch out my armour, and I think that's something that most Dark Souls players do and should do, because you can't rely on a piece of armour throughout the game. It will level with you, and that's cool, most of them anyway, that is. But as you can see here, if you just quickly look through, they've all got different attributes, and if you look in the right hand corner right next to my character where he is, at the bottom it says 97%.9, and then it'll go higher and lower and such. what this is your current weight, your total weight. You want to find a good balance if you're a melee build of weight and resistance. For instance, I'll show you, one sec, I'll show you what happens if you get your weight to, not the max, but yeah, we're fine like this. So now that I've got quite a heavy character, he seems okay, doesn't he? He seems great, but the thing is, as soon as you try and roll, it's quite a slow and cumbersome roll. Whereas if you were to switch that up for something that's got less defense, you'll find that your rolls are much more, well, they're faster. They're much faster. So it's good to get a balance, and it's good to switch things up constantly. This mask that I'm wearing now, this is something I always wear because it's very low. It's very low weight, and it provides good magic resistance, and it's just an all-round badass mask. It looks cool, man. It looks absolutely awesome. Okay. So now we're going to talk a bit about weapons and all the different types and what they do and what class is best suited to them. So what I use is a halberd, even though I'm a melee build. This really is suited more towards a dex build and someone that wants to keep their distance. You can be quite far back and hit someone with this, which is great. And it's good for, I guess what you'd call it is probing enemies and finding out what they do. If you don't want to get too close to them. So this thing has saved me many a time, and it's like I said, it's a halberd, and you can see the attacks here. So that's R1 attacks, and then we have R2 attacks, which is that's all I've got for R2 attacks. Now I'll quickly run through all the different weapon types in the game. There's daggers, straight short swords, great swords, ultra great short swords, curved swords, katanas, curved great swords, piercing swords, axes, great axes, hammers, great hammers, fist and claw, spears, halberds, lances, reapers, twin blades, whips, bows, great bows, crossbows, flames, chimes, staves, and that's it. So I'll show you my next step, the weapon that's next up. This is called the Great Key, I believe, and it's a great sword, and it is badass. I can't really use it effectively, but it's pretty damn cool. Now when you're choosing your build, this is a club. When you're choosing your build, well, once you've chosen your build, you'll want to find a weapon that's suitable for it. Now if you're going to go heavily armoured and you're going to have a high stamina, then you want to go with something like a club or a great sword, something like that, something that's big and powerful. Now I find these weapons really hard to use because you've got to be pointing with your analog stick in the direction that you want to hit it. It doesn't matter if you're locked onto someone. If you're locked onto someone and you move to the left with it, it'll hit to the left like that. So you've got to make sure you know what you're doing with it. You need to be quite nimble with it in a way, and rolling is a bitch with one. But they're great. And then same with great swords and the great hammers. They're for a heavy build, a really heavy melee build, which I am not. And then if you're a mage, you want to use chimes or catalyst, which I've shown in a previous video, I believe. I've shown the catalyst at least. I don't think they're called catalysts in this game though. But I'll show you a chime. I can't use a chime though right now, which kind of sucks. But this is a chime, and you use this to use miracles, I believe. And I can't use it because I haven't got high enough skills and stats, but they're what you use if you want to do spells and all that jazz. Right, you have 4 ring slots in this game, which is, it's always been that way, I believe. Since, well, I shouldn't say that, it's been that way since Dark Souls 1, whereas in Demon Souls you only had 2. Now I suggest as soon as you find a ring, regardless of what that ring is, wear it, and as soon as you get 4 rings, wear 4 rings, and just keep switching them out depending upon your circumstances. Never wear the same 4 rings throughout areas. For instance, now I'm wearing the Crest of the Rat. Now I've explained this in a previous video. The Crest of the Rat is a Covenant ring, and it only affects certain areas. There's no point wearing it in Medulla, so get rid of that and put something else on. Don't use the same rings in the same areas. If you know you're going to receive a load of fall damage, wear one that reduces, I don't know, your fall damage or your your life damage or whatnot, and then take it off. And then if you know, for example, say you're human and you know you're going to die, make sure that you're wearing your humanity ring so you don't lose your humanity if you're low on humanity. It's as simple as that. But make sure you always wear your 4 rings when you get a chance to actually have 4 rings. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about this episode, just the basics of why are these here? That's a good point. These weren't here before. But just make sure that you know what you're doing with your equipment. Also, one quick tip, Medulla is a great place to test stuff out and to mess around with things without receiving any damage or being penalised. Just avoid the vendors and the NPCs and all that jazz. But this is a great place to try something called QS, quick switching, which is basically when you run around like this, say you're being chased by an enemy, and you quickly change to your heaviest gloves and whatnot, and you just want to change it around because you're not wearing what you need to be wearing. It's a great place to try that out, and it's all about spatial awareness and using what you can. I don't know if you can see through the background, but it's kind of transparent so you can see where you're going. For instance, I know there's a house in front of me now to my left, so use your time in Medulla when you're here to try quick switching, because that'll be very useful in PvP and co-op play. So I think that's pretty much all I have time for today, guys. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. I know this was a bit everywhere, I didn't really plan this video out, but I hope it was helpful to some of you, and yeah, thank you for watching. Bye.